Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the second session of our NGO's training on organizational effectiveness that is being organized by the American Spaces in Nigeria. We had a session last week starting a nonprofit organization, which we were so fortunate to have Edem Osai, who was an accomplished facilitator in this area. She led us in a very wonderful session, and today also is going to help us again. So today, I would like to just ask her to please continue with the session so that everyone that is seated, that is joining, will be able to have full 2 hours today. Edem, over to you.
Thank you very much, sir. Good morning. Greetings to everyone who is joining our session. I'm excited once again to be able to share with you today on the rudiments of starting a nonprofit. Last week, we had a deep dive into some of the foundational steps and activities that you ought to carry out as founders or aspiring founders. I will do a quick recap of what we talked about in last week's session before I dive fully into today's planned discussion. It was an exciting and engaging session. We were able, can you see my screen, please? Just to do a thumbs up, I can see some people in the spaces. If you can see the screen with the resource, please let me know. Good, thank you. So we'll do a quick recap of some of the discussions we had last week. We basically talked about, the conceptual. What is the nonprofit? We're used to the language of NGO. We hear faith-based organizations, community-based organizations. We dealt with all of that, and I know that everyone who participated now has a proper understanding and grasp of what a nonprofit is. We then went on to talk about some of the steps, the essential steps that you need to carry out. You have to satisfy their requirements before you launch out, just before you launch out and start that nonprofit. Because we know the motivations. There's always a problem in your community that you are zealous about solving. And so with that lens and focus, oftentimes we just launch straight into, the initiative or the intervention. We hear terms like, and that is why, because of the failure to carry out many of these steps, oftentimes our activities are described as pet project, passion project, a term that I completely detest because it doesn't reflect the proper professionalism or the structures and systems that ought to serve as pillars for a sustainable organization. So we covered some of those essentials. We talked about how you must do your research. You have to be able to establish, the evidence-based, the evidential basis for that intervention. That, problem indeed in your community, you must establish that it exists. To what scale does the problem affect people or the conditions of your environment? What is the basis of your theory of change? Why do you believe that if you do this or that, it will result in the improvement you're claiming? So these are some things we covered. We talked about recruiting your board members, the essentials, what the role and responsibilities of your board represent in your organization, what you should consider when you are constituting your board. We talked about the critical requirement of strategic planning, sustainability planning. We talked about how you have to do your proper community assessment, the needs assessment, asset mapping, some of all those issues. We talked about the legal requirements, compliance with the regulatory and legal requirements in your context or your environment. CSCB is the governing body for nonprofits in Nigeria, and they have a set of requirements. We were able to talk about what those requirements are and how you should go about fulfilling them. We talked about things like drafting your articles of incorporation, your bylaws, or what we call the constitution of your organization. your board charters, and some of those essential, codes of conduct that will define the lifespan of your organization. So these were elements we discussed last week. We then went fully into a robust discussion on your board, your recruitment of your board, the steps, the documentation processes, what you should exchange with them in terms of reference, things like that, describing fully also the roles and responsibilities. If there are any issues that you think you need clarification around, you're still, it's a gray area, you still have certain doubts, please, there will be a Q&A session, or you can pop the questions in the chat box. I will try to address them. Today, I want to dive straight into an important element of our work as nonprofit founders and leaders and executives, which is sustainability, organizational sustainability. Organizational sustainability. I recall somebody asked last week, I don't remember her name, but she asked, oh, what's the difference between sustainability plans and strategic plans? These are terms we hear all the time. A lot of us are very familiar with strategic planning. We hear it recurring, strategic plan. Suddenly, you're hearing sustainability planning, and it's a bit confusing. We talked about it very briefly. Today, I want to do a deep dive into sustainability planning. What is it really about? Why do you need to do it? What are the elements you have to consider when you're doing sustainability planning? You see, I shared some of my own background into starting my organization, and I know that it is common with very many of us, if not all of us, who are listening in on this session. Majority of us started out wanting to do good. You just saw that problem. It was, you were restless about it, and you decided, I'm going to do something about it. And that became the seeds that led to the establishment of now this organization that you are responsible for. Some of you in the room may be appointees. You may be an executive director who was appointed. You may not be the founder. That is fine. Your journey into the nonprofit space is different. But majority of us who came in as founder executives is because there was a problem, we wanted to solve it. One of the things I like to stress to founders, based on experience, is that wanting to do good is not sufficient. It's not enough. Just that intuitive desire to contribute, to make an improvement, to bring about progress, as lofty and laudable as it is not enough. It is not enough, which is why on the average, many nonprofits don't survive their first 5 years. And that is me being generous. Indeed, most nonprofits don't survive the first 2 years because that motivation of just wanting to do good is not, like I said, sufficient enough to serve as a pillar for your organization's sustainability in a dynamic and competitive environment. Dynamic meaning that the environment is constantly changing. Competitive meaning that resources are scarce, and you too need to be able to tap into those resources that you need to continue to thrive as an organization. So this is why it is critical. Now, these slides really focus on the financial aspect of, if you look at the slides, suddenly my screen has disappeared. If you look at the slides, there's a strong focus on.
The slide is still on. You can still see it.
Okay, for me, it seems to have disappeared.
You're on Unit 4, Organizational Sustainability, Purpose, page 17. You can remove it and then come in again.
Coming again. I think the problem is from my viewing. Let me stop share. All right. Okay. So the slides, if you look at it, there's a strong focus on, just to establish the tone for this session. At the end of the day, the learning objectives, we're going to understand how to involve our board members and our stakeholders generally in, as funders, as part of our fundraising team or crew. We're going to understand how best to build organizational resources, leveraging private donations, private contributions, stakeholders. grants and proposal development and things like that. We also, understand in a better way processes for establishing, your funding strategy, creating funding strategy. I would appreciate if we can just try to mute our sound, just to avoid any either other side. So the slides you will see focus strongly on the revenue, the financial sustainability. However, I'm going to expand on this in my discussion with us. So please, founders, just follow me. I'm going to try to expand on this to address many of the concerns or many of the critical pillars that you need to cover when you are talking about sustainability. When we say sustainability, what are we simply mean? What are we saying? It's not enough to establish that organization. It's not enough to have your CAC certificate in your hand. It's not enough for you to, have constituted your board and held your first board meeting or even launched your first programs. In fact, what we see many times is that most founders have, and that's why I said last week, a lot of us as founders were very strong on the programmatic because it was the problem that led us into the intervention. So from the onset, our lens was always on designing an intervention, conceiving of a strategy or a solution, a nice program that will address this problem. Oh, maybe it's a training, maybe it's a women empowerment session, a skills acquisition program, oh, a cleanup drive, oh, hosting a civic engagement town hall meeting. Always, because we come in from the lens of the challenge that we are, that is being experienced in the environment or context we're working in, we are very good at designing programs. That usually is not where I have challenges with founders. They will have come up with a nice program, they will have designed, and oftentimes, however, that program is very short-term in outlook. It's very short-term, it's very immediate. It's very, this year, this is what we will do. Sustainability refers to the ability of an organization to thrive, to survive, and to succeed in a dynamic and competitive environment. Essentially, to keep running, to avoid death, to continue to run, that intervention that you launched is not as if when you do it in 2022, that will be the last we'll ever see of it. Rather, to guarantee that it will be possible for us to keep repeating and even scaling this program. So that's when you think about sustainability, this is what you're describing. You're talking about survival. You're talking about continuity. You're talking about succeeding, thriving. So these are the terms when you read sustainability, and sometimes you are writing, they will ask you at some point in the grant proposal to describe your sustainability plan. So apart from the wonderful, work plan you've developed, the concept you've shared, the indicators for monitoring that you've described, they will tell you, what is your plan to ensure the sustainability of this project beyond the grant that I'm offering you? What that simply is saying is, what is your plan to ensure that you will continue to sustain or you will continue to run this intervention even after I remove my money? This is always what must be top on your mind. And usually at the time we are starting, it's the farthest thing from our minds. But a founder, I guarantee you, a founder who from the very beginning sits down to think critically and develop a plan on sustainability is more likely, has a higher chance and probability of succeeding into the length of time than a founder who does not do that. You are more likely to, so instead of the typical mortality rates that we find that many NGOs suffer, you are likely to survive, you are likely to thrive. And I know that that's usually the goal for everybody who is participating in this session. You don't want to launch something and have it die. Your goal is for it to survive. In fact, for many people who are even long-term in thinking, you want it to survive you, especially those who have come into the space, maybe in retirement, maybe in the latter part of your career. Some of us are younger. We start out early. Some people start out mid-career. Some people start out even, post-retirement. So your thought process should always be, how can I guarantee that this beautiful initiative is able to continue and survive the test of time. So what are the things we must be paying attention to when we're discussing sustainability? Now, for me, it's a combination of the structures, and I'm going to try to simplify this because there are many theories of sustainability. You hear people talk about resource dependence theory. Basically, that theory is saying that the sustainability of your organization is dependent on the resources that come in. The income, the level of income you are able to attract into the organization is what will determine whether the organization will outlive, the times or will survive, the challenges of the era. There's also what we call the stakeholder engagement theory. Some people argue that it's the level to which you're able to engage stakeholders and build partnerships that will determine the sustainability of your organization. Whether it's local stakeholders, scaling it up to wider, external, broader, whatever the case may be. If an organization does not have stakeholders that are actively engaged in its activities, that theory argues that it cannot survive, it cannot be sustainable. There are theories that talk about institutional governance, institutional theory. That theory, the institutional theory, talks about things like the corporate governance system. If an organization is not well governed, if there's not enough effective leadership, defining the vision and able to drive its mission and objectives, to supervise the teams, to manage the strategies, that our organization will not be sustainable. You also have agency, social management theory, which is basically looking at employees and their relationships. How does that organization manage conflict? How does it safeguard the interests of organizations? There was a very popular scandal that hit about a few years ago. Oxfam was involved, where we had a scandal in which representatives of the organization at Oxfam, who were sent to Haiti after the earthquake to provide relief services to internally displaced persons, were accused of exchanging or trading relief materials for sexual gestures. They were basically demanding, so there was abuse. And that scandal, by virtue of that, affected the survival of the organization. That scandal almost terminated the life of that organization because it was a huge global scandal. Investors pulled out, funders and donors and everybody pulled out. The board was questioned, so many things. So sometimes you may be doing everything right, and just one aspect related to how your employees manage projects on the field could basically compromise the entire window of your work. So sustainability is such a broad concept, and there are many theories that relate to it. For the purpose of this, our session, so that we keep it simplified and practical, for me, I've categorized sustainability under 4 components, because in my experience as an NGO founder and executive, for me, these 4 critical components, when I pay attention to them, I do better. My organization is able to progress into the next year. But where I fail or neglect or omit to pay attention to any of these components, I run into trouble. So I've divided sustainability into these broad headings. The first, we're talking about structure. And I'll go on to elaborate. When we say structure, what are we talking about? When we are talking about structure, we're talking about the people and how they are organized. So sometimes you will encounter a grant application that will ask you, share with me your organogram. It's a sustainability question. They want to see the structure of how this organization is set up. How its people, organogram just means, how the organs of the organization are woven together to bring about its mission. How are you people divided? How are you people organized? Into what units or departments, what hierarchies, what horizontal layers? That's organogram. It is a key question on sustainability. Many times, because of how we start, we are using volunteers. Most of us, when you are a founder, you don't have money to hire staff, except you are one of those fortunate people who gained an institutional grant, and on the basis of that institutional grant, you launched your nonprofit. But if you are like me, who went around your family networks, your friend networks to raise donations to start a project, you entered into this work from a project lens. It was project that led you to evolve, to go to the bank, to go to CAC before you then had an organization. Most likely, you kicked off with volunteers. Most likely, even you yourself, when you are your first volunteer, because you were probably not earning a salary when you started. The first money you make is not what you'll be using to pay yourself. So most of the time, our initial launch into the space is volunteer driven. Our work is often volunteer driven. You have to understand the times and the seasons and how to cross the seasons or to evolve fast and punctually. You must keep your appointment with organizational development. When you start with volunteers, that your goal for a sustainable organization should not be to continue to work with volunteers throughout. One of the things I look out for I have a tool, we have a tool, a diagnostic tool for the health of organizations. And in it, there's a critical component where we look at the people structure, internal and external. That internal evaluation of its people, we are checking to see its composition of staff. Are you volunteer driven or do you have some level of permanent staff? It is critical. You see, because as wonderful as volunteers are, and we cannot do this work without leveraging volunteers. However, volunteers are transient. They are temporary. They come and they go. They have no contract with you. At best, they have terms of reference or terms of engagement, for a short period of time. Very often, it's young people, maybe undergraduates or fresh graduates who are in between seasons of their life and looking to acquire workplace skills to complement what they're learning in the classroom, or they are waiting for a job, and in the period when they are waiting to get that job, they then want to volunteer with you. Or it's somebody who has retired and wants to give back. Or it's a teacher who is on vacation and the summer break and decides in this period that I'm on leave or on vacation, I want to serve. Similarly, another professional who has time on his or her hands and says, I want to commit. Or it might be your board members who are your volunteers. However, sustainability, when I say people, you're looking at how do I graduate from these temporary staff and volunteers to permanent, formal staff. People who are engaged for a defined period of time. People whose role is carefully defined, is well elaborated. People who bring experience to the job, not just people who want to learn on the job. You see, because you also need to be able to leverage the skill sets that people have in the labor market to complement the goals that you are seeking for your organization. It makes you more sustainable. Some grant applications will tell you, submit the CVs of the project officers you intend to work on this grant. They are using it to gauge the level of skill sets that each person on the project is bringing to the table. They are using that to then estimate how much you have pegged as project officers' allowances and to gauge whether it's in line with industry rates or market rates, or you have embellished it. This therefore tells you that when you want to be taken seriously, you have to be able to present formal staff. Some people will even go as far as to ask you, how many permanent staff do you have? Or how many formal staff do you have? That is a way they are also gauging the health of the organization. How sustainable is it? Because if I have a project, or as a donor, I put $5,000 or 20,000 pounds in a project that is run by an organization who has only volunteers, it's a huge risk because those volunteers have no contract of employment. And so that investment I've made, is at risk of failing because they can get up and walk away and go away anytime. So please, when you talk about structure, we're looking at the people and how they are organized. Now, the key things we need to think about at the level we are starting out at as founders, most times, keep it simple. Keep your structure simple. You may not have the resources to start hiring a HR manager, HR expert. Bring in, a branding specialist. You don't have those monies. They're not at your disposal at the moment, but there are basic pillars that have to be in place. For instance, most likely you're bringing in funds. And that means that from the very day one, I always tell founders, from day one, financial management procedures come into play. In fact, if you look at last week's slides, last week's session, when we talked about some of the essential rudiments or foundational key aspects of setting out, there is an aspect that talks about your financial management procedures and your accrual system. From day one that you are registered with CAC, at the end of that year, CAC is expecting you to file returns. Returns basically involving or comprising of your audited financial statements, your board meetings and minutes of and resolutions of meetings, things like that. If, you know, what we always argue when we are founders with very little money and operating on a shoestring budget, most times as founders, you are the one funding your organization. It is your pocket, it's your money that is driving the activities of the organization. From time to time, yes, a few of your friends may donate, but it is very likely that you are the primary donor of your organization. It doesn't excuse you from the responsibility of doing your audit, your financial audit, or setting up financial management systems. And that is where we are often, you know, missing or failing in. This is where we are error prone. But I'll go into systems and procedures subsequently. What I'm trying to drive at is that it is important that you bring in somebody who has administrative and financial management skills. Bring in somebody who can handle that unit. In your organogram, it is very healthy for an organization as a start, even when you are at starting out phase, to have that unit carved out. Oh, I must have a unit that handles administration, overall administration, and financial management. You can call it any name you want. If you have enough means and you're able to hire an accountant, a qualified accountant who has all their, you know, qualifications, their ICANN, their this, good for you. If you don't have the resources to bring in that level of skilled individual, there are many tools that support accounting and financial management procedures. If you bring in an admin officer who has some, you know, basic experience with managing finances for an organization, and you can support that person's role with maybe an app. You buy a software for, you know, managing your accounting procedures in your organization. That is helpful. Or you ensure that that person is trained in Excel. Excel is a wonderful software that provides, you know, support, accounting support for organizations, if you know how to leverage the features of Excel. Most importantly, these are examples of departments and units you must have, because a donor who is going to think of you credibly is going to check first and foremost how you've handled any money that has come into your organization, including your money. So the fact that you were the chief and primary funder of your organization does not excuse you from the obligation of having good financial practices and procedures. So that's one example of one unit or department or directorate, whatever languages you want to use for your own organization. If you are somebody that is running programs, I would expect that you will have a program officer or a program director, whatever term, or a program manager, somebody who oversees, you know, the programmatic side of things, the work planning, the operation of the projects, you know, the learning, the reporting, programmatic reporting, the monitoring. When you then have even more resources, you should even have a research and MEL team or unit or department, that is the monitoring, evaluation, and learning team, you know, that engages in, that also combines maybe research, helps with the baseline assessment, all those needs assessment. Before you launch an intervention in the community, that research team or department or officer goes out on the field to hold focus groups, to hold interviews, to engage with stakeholders on the field, to get information that serves as an evidence guiding the organization on what strategies or what programs to actually design. And then in the lifespan of the project, continues to monitor it based on indicators that have been designed. These are very important departments or units to structure your organization around. So most times we know because CAC requires us to have a board, we usually have a board. Because you are the founder and director, automatically you satisfy management level, you are the day-to-day management. But when it comes to structuring the people, organizing them in different units where they can apply their skill sets in a way that drives the mission, you know, brilliantly or effectively, sometimes we're not good at that. All you need to do sometimes is to pick up a basic management book or a basic, you know, startup book on, oh, how to set up my small, you know, small and medium organization, small and medium company, even start for profit, many resources and books and publications that help, for profit organizations are relevant in the context of nonprofits, because it will help you. Some of those principles of how to divide roles are universal, and it will help you to determine, given the available resources I have, given my mission statement, what is the basic level of roles that I need to have as permanent staff right now? Oh, I need to have a program officer. Oh, I must have an administrative officer who helps to sit in the office to receive the letters and the emails, to address them, to send out, messages or correspondence to trainers and facilitators, or to help the operational side of things, paying for the utilities in the office, ensuring the generator is working, making sure our laptops are effective. All of those things you have to define. Oh, it might be relevant also for you to have, a communications team if you have the resources, and maybe you have enough money such that you don't want the program, the one doing storytelling. Storytelling is a very vital component of our work, given the explosion and the relevance of social media in today's world. Then you say, I have to have a communications, strategist or an online storytelling. So this is another example of a role. But structures, again, going back to that number one critical aspect of sustainability, refers to the people and how they are organized or how their roles are divided. It is a very key component of sustainability. Now, another thing, again, let me stress, volunteers are relevant. Volunteers are critical because at the level where you are starting, you don't have huge resources at your disposal. But my point is, your objective, your goal should be to graduate very speedily from complete reliance on volunteers. So you will always have them. My organization, we thrive, we always have interns and volunteers, but they are the last level of our organogram. We begin with the board, we have the management, we have the unit department office heads, that is the directors of the different departments. Then we have program officers within each department. Then at the bottom of our own organogram lies our volunteers and our interns. It is important for us to have them because most times we draw volunteers from the communities where we are hosting projects. It encourages a better buy-in from those communities. Sometimes it's also a way to reduce our costs. In fact, most times it's a way to reduce our costs because volunteers want to learn. Their primary motive is not, they know that they are not yet skilled in terms of the labor market requirements. So they can't yet negotiate for huge salaries, but they are using this as an opportunity to increase their advantage when they graduate. So it's a win-win situation. So you do need them, but you can't have 100% reliance on volunteers. The turnover rate of volunteers is too high for the sustainability of any organization. You are doing a project. It was a volunteer that helped you run it. Next thing you know is that volunteer has gone for youth service. All the project information, maybe you didn't understand record keeping, you didn't have structures for, archives, filing, maybe you didn't even have an office yet, and everything was virtual. And next thing, that person has gone. That person carries all the knowledge about that project, the stakeholders, the address of that local chief, that chief in that community that gave us permission. The volunteer is the one seized of all the knowledge. And then the person goes. You now want to hire a new person. And for you to transfer that project to that new person, it's possible. Because apart from the few things that were put in writing, all the other working knowledge of the whole processes has gone away with that volunteer. It's dangerous, So, or sometimes even the time it takes for the new person to adjust to the role, for the new person to be fully oriented into the role, is a luxury you don't have, or that project does not have, because maybe that project is a 1-year grant, has a 1-year grant, condition attached to it. So these are examples of why sustainability involves having permanent people and ensuring that these people's roles are properly, allocated. Roles are well defined. You have to segment the functions, the basic functions that will give rise to to actualizing your mission statement must be well categorized. You must split them and have people managing those hem of affairs. Having talked about structure now, let's move on to the next component or element of sustainability. And here I will spend a lot of time. This is what we call systems and processes. Systems and procedures or processes. It is where many of us, if we were using a score sheet, many of us will score very low. Very low. Systems and processes. Financial systems, programmatic operating systems, your safeguarding systems, the different systems that give birth to the entirety of your work. Everything you are doing is forming a system. So most times people don't know. Do you know that even your recruiting procedures is a system, is a key element of HR practice, recruitment. But oftentimes you have not been able to standardize it. Even the way you recruit volunteers. So a lot of organizations or founders, when I ask them, can you share with me some of your operating procedures? They don't even have a clue what I'm discussing. I say, okay, to give you an illustration, tell me how you go about recruiting staff and volunteers. Is there any documented process? Is there any document that serves as a standard guideline that defines the steps that must be carried out when any recruitment procedure is embarked upon in your organization? So the problem is when we start, because we, like I said, we begin, from the knowledge in our head. We are just going by, day to day. We are not documenting. We are not establishing protocols. We are therefore not creating systems. A system establishes a standard way of doing things, a standard procedure. What is the standard procedure? It means that when you as the founder is not available, when you are absent, you are on leave, you are on vacation, you are on maternity leave, you are on sick leave, whatever, or you have gone for graduate studies, or you just need a break, that standard procedure guideline is still at work. That even if you are not there to recruit the next communications expert in your organization, your admin officer will simply open the guideline procedures of your organization and see the steps they must carry out. Or you have so operationalized this that everybody knows the steps that go into each procedure. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about systems. And if you want to be taken seriously, it is a critical element of sustainability, because without systems, I guarantee you, and without effective systems, let me put it that way, without effective systems, you are playing with the sustainability of your organization. You are not likely to be able to survive, succeed, and thrive in a dynamic and competitive environment. Systems are critical. Systems are wide, all-encompassing. Some people, if you look at your computer, for instance, there is a system with which it functions. That's why we say, oh, is it a Windows system? Is it an iOS system? If it's a phone, is it an Android? Is it iOS? All of those things refer to the functionality, the way it functions. It is now so standardized that everybody knows that iOS devices, Apple devices, this is how they do. Android devices, this is how they operate. That is how you must get to with respect to your organization. Your organization must have systems that evolve into culture. Is now the way and practice, the way your organization operates. Internally, the staff knows that this is the way we function in this place. And your goal should be to drive for high performance system, high performance level, high levels of performance. Well, if it's in terms of the employees, your goal should be to erect systems that drive high levels of performance. When it is with respect to your assets, your relationships, your stakeholder relationships, Your goal should be to erect systems that ensure the highest standard of safeguarding. For instance, you are into digital literacy. You are housing devices. You have so many computers and you invite people to come for basic computer trainings. And you have not put in place safeguarding measures. Safeguarding measures involve protecting of your assets, that is, include your safeguarding measures basically ensure that your work does not cause harm or injury. Harm or injury is not only to the people, the stakeholders, also to your investment. So you have to put measures that, manage risks, mitigate risks, ensure that when your staff go on the field, they comply with the codes of conduct of your organization, systems. I know many organizations, I will ask them, I'll say, oh, how many staff do you have? I've asked a few founders, how many staff? They say, oh, we have 3. I'll say, can I see their contract or letters of engagement? Or can I see the code of conduct that governs their contract with you? They'll say, code of conduct. So you entrust the reputation of your organization into a staff and an employee, and you have not signed any, that person has exchanged no obligation. There's no code of conduct defining the relationship of that person with your organization. That person does not understand what the organization expects of him or her in terms of performance, in terms of good conduct. Very dangerous. That person may go onto the field. Maybe you're going for a community drive, and then next thing, that person begins to solicit for gifts. Maybe you're going to schools, or, sometimes when you're dealing with schools, you have some very wonderful people. You have teachers that will say, if you want us to allow you, or principals that will say, if you want us to allow you to come and teach the students, what will you give the school? Or what will you give the teachers? Because it means they have to stay, they have to stay extra time. You have to compensate me. And your organization has no code of conduct defining how employees or staff should manage such situations. Next thing, you find yourself embroiled in bribery and all sorts of transactional relationships with gatekeepers, people who should serve as, basically the government has already given you approval to work in the schools. These people are supposed to exist as support systems to ensure that these projects are supervised to run effectively in the schools without harming the well-being of the students. Yet they are now using it to transact and solicit for funds, and your organization has no code of conduct. And your next thing, your project officer is in a deal or some kind of arrangement that they will be collecting money from students to get computer training when it is time for WAEC or JAMB, because JAMB is computer-based. Meanwhile, your project is supposed to be free. You hear all sorts of scandals. So this is why policies and procedures are critical. Sustainability means that you as the founder, you have to go and develop policies. And this is where your board comes in. This is why, if you recall last week when we were talking about the responsibilities of your board and how you should be careful in the selection of your board members, and why you should ensure diversity in terms of the skill sets that your board members bring to the table. It is for things like policies, because one of your board members may have a keen understanding, for instance, of financial management, and will tell you that, oh, I have a guideline that you can borrow, a financial management practice or procedure guideline that we use in my company. I'll send you the policy. You can adapt it for use in your organization. Or the person even goes as far as to say, I will help you develop a financial management procedure for the running of your NGO. Or maybe you'll say, oh, I will go and Google. I will go and check for templates available online. But sir, ma, I would like you to be able to review this document for us to see its appropriateness in the context in which we are working. This is the role of your board. Your board has to approve the policies that govern the functioning systems of your organization. That's why usually when we even see policies, we will check, did the board chairman or chairwoman sign? Has the board scrutinized this policy? Has the board approved it? The policies you develop for the running of your organization, for the sustainability of your organization, must pass through your board members. This is part of the work of the board. You have to have risk management policies. risk management. One of the things that taught us the importance of risk management was the year 2020 when COVID-19 struck. A lot of people, because COVID changed the economic landscape in which many NGOs were operating. Local philanthropy dried up. Many people were not receiving. Hello? So, for some reason, I don't know why I got logged out. I think my network got interrupted. But as I was saying, I said one of the things that emphasizes the need, or one of the examples in the lives of NGOs that emphasized on the need for risk management was the impact of COVID-19 on the landscape, on the economic landscape. A lot of funding sources dried up. People were not getting donations anymore. Grants were not coming in. The grants that were coming in were all channeled towards, helping people adapt, education, relief and palliative measures, but other aspects of human development were greatly neglected in favor of, real existential problems, or things that ensured basic survival. Things that ensured so grants at the time were focused mainly on how can we distribute health, safety, and relief, materials to communities to prevent the spread of the pandemic. Oh, how can we support research that allows us to immediately discover vaccines that can stop, the severity of impact of the pandemic. So the other aspects of our SDG work were not attractive at that point in time. So many NGOs folded up. Many NGOs suspended their programming. If they were even able to survive and pay for rent of their building and offices, most NGOs were not able to run interventions in their host communities where they typically held interventions. For many NGOs that are whose activities are school-based, because of the closure of schools, they were unable to, repurpose their activities to design community-based interventions. So it had a lot of challenges. This is what you do with what they call risk management policy. Your risk management policy, beginning of every year, should look at the environment, should look at the economic, the environmental, even the environment, because sometimes it might be that you are living in a place that is drought or, flooding prone. You have to factor those things into consideration. What if a heavy flood affects your workspace and destroys all your equipment? These are important things to consider in risk management, and you must incorporate the assessment into your budget every year. So these are things I'm just trying to illustrate examples of what should go into your systems and procedures when we're talking about sustainability. When you talk about sustainability, organizations will say the first thing most donors will ask you is they want to see your, like I said, your internal controls when it comes to money, your financial controls. They want to see your procurement. How do you spend? When you want to purchase, when you want to procure items, when you want to buy office equipment, what's your procurement policy? How is it done? Is it the founder that is the sole signatory of the account? Or is it a double signatory account, system where there is a check, there's somebody who can, counteract against the founder? Oh, somebody says they can't see my screen. Okay, let me stop sharing and open again. I'm sure we can see it now. Thank you for informing me about that. So again, still discussing sustainability, and I was talking about financial sustainability. Some people will want to see who is the person that controls the banks, who is the person that signs the checks, who is the person that has access to disbursement of funds, because that means that one person, if it's controlled by one person alone, there's nobody acting as a check against that person. Your money can just go, or sometimes it may be that the person falls ill, God forbid, or the person has an accident, God forbid, and next thing, the whole organization is unable to access the accounts, the passwords, different things, the signatures. So that is not a healthy system. Or they will say, when you want to make purchases above a certain amount, how many people have to approve? Or is it that the founder can approve amounts all the way up to 5 million at a go? These are things they check. Or when you want to make purchases, what's the requisition system? What's the procedure? Do you go to the market and obtain estimates from maybe 3 different vendors? Or is it possible for the organization to just call somebody in the organization, the admin officer to just call his brother and say, we just got 1 grant. We are supposed to, build renewable banks, recycling banks, or we are supposed to train people in a solar system installation. I want to give you the contract. Even if that company does not meet up to, the standards of best value. Because anytime you are purchasing, the standard that must go into a decision process for purchase is best value in the market. But if I am able to just farm out, purchases or procurements to my relatives, to my friends, that does not guarantee that I will get the best market value for that purchase. That is, I will get the most affordable and high quality item, the highest quality item for the most affordable rate. These are the things. So they want to see your financial management procedures. Similarly, your operating procedures. People are going to go on the field for a project. What is the system in place? Is there a work plan? Does your organization operate with a work plan? Or how am I supposed to know that this project officer is at this site doing this project? Programmatically, there must be operating procedures. A work plan must be shared with the supervisor. The supervisor must approve it. Management must be able to supervise all existing projects by monitoring the work plan. They must know and approve the work plan that is ongoing in the organization. So if it is Wednesday, 2 p.m., I should be able to know from the work plan that, my staff are currently in this community doing a cleanup drive, because there is a standard operating procedure for programs. Or if it involves using the vehicle of the organization or some assets, before assets can be taken out, they must be, signed out. There must be due requests made. Or if, there's some external people want to use the conference room, there must be bookings. Bookings must be done. The purpose of the meeting must be logged, must be known to the organization. These are examples of standard operating procedures. You must have them. You have to then also find a way. It's not enough to just have policies and guidelines. You must be able to operationalize your policies. You must be able to operationalize your policies. I'll give you an example. When in 2020, we began to work with the Queen's Commonwealth Trust as a partner, a very critical aspect of our work that concerned them was safeguarding. They wanted to ensure that we had a safeguarding system in place. That system was built on a safeguarding policy and operational procedures. Operational means that you must be able to train all the staff in that policy. And then you must be able to put in place or effect measures that ensure the daily operations of that policy. So for instance, a safeguarding logbook. For instance, a safeguarding chart. Whenever we go into any community to do any work or any school to do any project, we hang our safeguarding chart that tells the beneficiaries of the project what we owe them in terms of safeguarding, how to safeguard their rights. And if they have any complaints, any kind of complaints whatsoever, who they can report to in the organization for remedy, or how can they communicate that complaint so that it can be addressed. All of these things mean that you have a system in place. There must be a safeguarding lead, because a lot of organizations just have policies, but there's nobody who is responsible for bringing that policy to life on a day-to-day basis. If you have an HR policy, then you will need either an HR or administrative officer to give effect to that policy. When you hire, that officer writes the letters or contracts of engagement, submits the codes of conduct, does the onboarding. There must be onboarding protocols. These are examples of policies and procedures. All these things, they are not just formalities. They all go towards sustainability, the question of sustainability. Because take, for example, you bring a new staff into your organization. You don't do any orientation. There's no onboarding. The person does not know the person just knows the contract. Oh, I'm supposed to do these things for the organization. The person is not trained in the workplace culture, in the code of conduct. Oh, these are the 7 things you must never do. These are the 5 things you must always do. If you have this and that complaint, this is who to reach out to. If you have any complaint lodged against you, you have this number of days to immediately, respond to the query or complaint. Basically, acculturation, it is critical. There must be refresher trainings. There must be a culture of, in-house trainings. These are all things that describe the procedures, like I said, the standard operating practices and procedures of your organization. You must define them. It's a lot of work. As an organizational leader or manager, it is very different from that founder who launched that project or launched that NGO. You are now stepping into management. You are managing the 3 Ps: people, processes, products. In our case, our products, we change it to programs because we are not in the business of selling or products and services. We are into business of interventions. But moving from founder to organizational manager means that you must do this hard work, means that you must subject yourself to learning, because these are the pillars upon which your organization will be able to sustain itself. People, structures, systems, procedures. So I've highlighted some of these systems. When you are doing your sustainability plan, it means that you will say to yourself, in the first 1 year, I need to divide the work I'm doing. Maybe you are an NGO that addresses maternal mortality. Oh, because we go into communities, we rely a lot on donations that we used to buy equipment, beds, hospital beds, delivery safety kits for women. We're constantly procuring. We have to have a financial finance officer. That's one role in your organogram. Oh, even though we bring in experts who come to facilitate training for midwives and nurses and healthcare practitioners, and also to sensitize pregnant mothers, we also need an in-house expert, a program officer who has experience in public health or is qualified in public health. So that's another role, and that's another permanent role you have defined. Oh, we have to be able to do our monitoring and evaluation, because we're in the public health sector. We must be able to account for the number of people reached, the number of midwives actually trained, the improvements in the practices of midwifery in that community, post-training, baseline assessment, and end-line assessment. We have to have a monitoring and evaluation officer. You then define that. For us, it is critical that we have these 3 roles. Right now, we don't have enough resources, so we cannot hire a storyteller. The programs officer is going to be the one that will manage all our online storytelling channels. That's an example of how critical people are to the question of sustainability. Then you say, in terms of practices and procedures, because we are dealing with vulnerable pregnant women, we must always make sure that as a practice, anytime we go into communities, we get the consent, the informed consent of these women before we do any, training for them. That is a standard practice. Oh, another standard practice is all our interventions must involve the use of both indigenous and English language, because we're going into rural communities and we're encountering different profiles of women, and we want to make sure that we are able to communicate effectively to them. As a standard practice, all our training programs must involve a translator. These are examples of procedures that you define for how you run programs. As a standard practice, every field, at the end of every field project, a report must be developed and submitted. Oh, as a standard practice for corporate governance, we must hold 3 board meetings yearly, or a minimum of 2 meetings with our board members every year, to keep them abreast of the activities of the organization and to garner better support for them in the aspect of fundraising. These are standard operating procedures you are defining. Now, I will move on to, it is 11:59 right now, exactly 1 hour. I will move on to the third. Let me move on to the third aspect of sustainability planning before I pause for questions. Then I'll go to the final one, which is resources, money, funding, money, revenue, and how we can, put in place measures to ensure sustainability through fundraising efforts. So the third aspect of sustainability, which we have to focus on as founders, is, I call it capacities. Capacities. Now, remember we talked first about the structure of the system that we are putting, the structure of the organization. How do we structure it? Are we going to have is it going to be an online based, program that just needs virtual staff? For instance, if my NGO wants to educate that one of the greatest reasons for lack of democratic culture amongst youth in Nigeria is a lack of civic education. My goal is therefore to leverage technology to promote civic education to youth from the ages of so to so, or youth from secondary to tertiary education ages in Nigeria. For that purpose, I don't need to have a huge office that has, you might just, create an online system where you have maybe, you sit down and say, okay, one of our interventions is going to be awareness creation, training on democratic principles and tenets. Oh, we're also going to be hosting school clubs or training or setting up democracy clubs in schools. Oh, we're going to be doing so and so. Now, you might decide that the structure that you need does not require HR officer, admin officer, this other officer. Rather, what you need is civic brand ambassadors. Maybe your goal is civic brand ambassadors who can, in their schools or in their universities, educate other undergraduates, go into communities, sensitize people, distribute information and awareness materials on democracy, host discussions in school settings, in school platforms around democracy, and most importantly, host maybe online-based sessions, Twitter live sessions, Instagram live sessions, Facebook live sessions, sessions that just leverage technology to reach youth clusters, young people where they are clustered, or WhatsApp. Maybe you might decide you want to use WhatsApp groups. WhatsApp, you want to host WhatsApp webinars on, democratic procedures. Oh, these are the things you must do to get your voter's card. Oh, whenever you're participating in any election, how not to sell your vote. Oh, this, that. So the mission might define the structure you adopt. So different NGOs will have different structures. Not everybody is going to have a HR expert, a community engagement officer, an accountant sitting in the office, this, that. You might decide that for some of those things, you can even outsource. For your storytelling, you just have one graphics designer who just handles the graphics, component of things, and you ensure that you are doing that. The programs officer is the one compiling the programs reports. Oh, at the end of this Twitter live, we had 500 online followers join the Twitter live. We were able to hold a 2-hour session with a Q&A discussing the principle of voting. Many young people were able to, encounter, or a lot of misconceptions on voting rights were corrected. And the program officer basically generates all the reports, and you disseminate your reports to your stakeholders effectively, and your structure is an online structure. So it is up to you, based on the mission of your organization and the programs that you have defined that will give expression to that mission, to then frame the right kind of structure that can support. Every organization must have this person, that person, that person. No, I'm saying look internally at what you hope to achieve as a founder, and then critically define what role is required to give expression to this objective. What role, who do I need to have somebody sitting in this role to be able to achieve this objective? It's those things that will determine for you, the structure you create. There are very many, there are basic principles and policies and procedures that are universal. Safeguarding is a universal principle. So even if you are an online-based structure, you must be able to safeguard the interests of your stakeholders, that is the beneficiaries, your staff, online. In fact, there's a whole realm called digital safeguarding, because people can hack into your database and take people's privacy details and begin to use it for commercial purposes, to use it to market and do all kinds of things. Sometimes we get unsolicited text messages because maybe we went somewhere and we wrote our phone number somewhere, and the people that we gave our phone numbers to have sold it out to these commercial actors and transactors. So it is important that you must have digital safeguarding structures in place. Whenever you want to hold a program, please collect media consent. These days, a lot of people may not be aware, especially when you are dealing with underage, people that are not yet of the age to give their own consent. Make sure, in the past, I'll give an example of my organization. We thought it was sufficient to get media consent from the government, the Ministry of Education when you want to do school projects, and then to get media consent from the schools. We learned along the way that it is important to get media consent from the individual students, one after the other. Send the media consent home with them, let their guardian or their parents sign it and then return it. If you are hosting a program for people of the age of consent, that is adults, before you start taking their picture that you want to put in your report, your end of year report, or put online, or put on your website, or put on your Instagram page, please ensure that you gather and obtain the media consent of your participants. This is a question of sustainability too. We've had cases where somebody said, oh, my picture was shared on a website without my consent. I will sue this organization. And the organization was unable to survive the blow to its reputation as a result of that contention. We have cases where maybe there's a domestic issue. We've had cases where maybe a mother is living in another community. Maybe there's a child, you went for a project, you took the project of a child, a picture of a child rather, and you posted it. Meanwhile, maybe the parent or guardian has been hiding from an abusive spouse or hiding from an abusive partner, and that partner has been trying to locate the whereabouts of that child. And next thing, through your post, the abusive partner discovers the whereabouts and location of that child and goes to the school behind the back of the parent who has custody and picks up that child, kidnaps that child, and takes the child away. Many stories have come into play, under discovery because of some lapse of judgment of an organization when it comes to systems and procedures. On the third component, which is capacities, it's not enough to have people. It's not enough to have roles. It's not enough to have policies and procedures. Like I said, capacity is referring to the quality of execution, the quality, the level of efficiency, the level of your execution. You can have high-performing people and you can have low-performing people, and it affects sustainability because you are spending more to pay them a salary and keep them in your payroll than the value that they are bringing into the organization. You have somebody whose role it is to write grants and proposals, and every month you are paying the person 150, 250,000 naira. And in 1 year, they've not brought in one single donor. You are not sustainable. That role is not sustainable because that person is not earning, his or her pay. That person is not a high-performing individual. So you have to be able to do appraisals of your capacity. Do I have the capacity to execute my planning as an organization? Am I able, with the kind of people I have, to go into this community, to hold this project, to organize this project, in such a way and manner as to satisfy the stakeholders' expectations, even beyond their imagination, that they will come back for second round funding. Or that the community will say, this thing that you brought for free, it was so good, we want to adopt it and we are willing to fund it. That is capacity. When you're talking about capacity, you're talking about high-level execution such that it makes people want round two. It makes people come back for a second, round. Your trainees go away and say, that training was wonderful. The employability training in the green sector, they trained us in horticulture, they trained us in soilless farming. Now, because of this training, I've been able to start up my own soilless farm, my own small business. I'm now able to support my small family. And through word of mouth, people now keep coming back or keep subscribing for your training. That is what they call high-level capacity that attracts, sustainability. It means that you were able to execute your intervention in such a manner that it is compelling enough to get stakeholders to want it to repeat itself. They want to replicate and sustain it, that they are willing to fund it again. That is capacity. Let me pause at this point to take questions. When I return, I will now go into resources, money. When we're talking about sustainability planning from the angle of money, revenue, funding, because money is the fuel that makes the engine run. You can do every other thing, and if you don't bring in money, you are not sustainable. That's why money is a critical, almost a standalone component. That is why this slide is focusing very greatly on fundraising strategies, fund development. Many people focus on the resource dependence theory of sustainability, because at the end of the day, it boils down to the argument. If I have no money, but I have all these other things, will the organization be able to run? However, if I have money, I can put in place some of these other things gradually. So that's why a lot of people believe that when it comes to the question of sustainability, the key issue to address is funding. Yes, structures are critical. Structures will ensure, survival, it will ensure quality assurance, it will ensure all those other things. But money is what keeps you alive to begin to even make those improvements. Let me pause now for us to take our Q&A segment.
Right, thank you very much for the wonderful session. And I believe you also should take a little rest, isn't it?
Let me start with my water.
All right, thank you very much. This is now time for question and answer session. Edem has really taken us through the nitty-gritty of developing your funds. Even the good book, the Bible said, money answereth all things. So if you have any question, this is the time for you to raise your hand, your virtual hand, and then we'll call you. Any question from anybody, any of our American Spaces? I can't see any hand up. Okay, I think I really enjoyed taking in what you have said. It must have been so huge, because I can see somebody say, wow, thanks a lot for the enlightening session. The training is an eye-opening session. This information is really mind-blowing. When you are hearing words like this, Edem, some people have not recovered yet. So can we just continue so that probably towards the tail end, there may be some questions, because some of these things are realities. Yes, somebody said there's a question earlier on. Let me check. All right, I've seen the question. It says from Abiodun, at what stage do we deploy operational guidelines vis-a-vis safeguarding framework, especially when you don't have funding, or you really, but you rely on remote volunteer?
Okay, let me start with that. I also see, I think Uyo window, there was a hand up. So maybe after this one, we can check them.
All right.
Let me start by saying that safeguarding is not funding dependent. The minute you're going in to do, you see, because in there's what we call power dynamics. You are in a position of trust and power when you are working in a community where there's disadvantage, or when you are working with a group of people who are experiencing some kind of disadvantage. That's the reason why you brought in your intervention. So there's some sort of, upper hand you have. Either it is in the area of knowledge, higher knowledge than the participants you want to transfer the knowledge to, or whether it is with a higher level of skills and resources. Maybe you want to transfer skills and resources to that person. You want to do skills acquisition program for high school leavers or high school dropouts who are unemployed. Or you want to do women economic empowerment. You want to train women in rural areas on how to plant moringa so that they can then be able to have income. Whatever it is, you are in a position of power. From the minute you have access to any group with a disadvantage, you must put in place safeguarding. And safeguarding does not require money the way we think. It doesn't mean that, you're going to go and you have to hire a safeguarding expert from London who comes to train everybody on. No. In fact, you might be your first safeguarding lead. You might be the one that has to combine that role, since you don't have the resources to hire a safeguarding actor or officer, right? You might be the one who is responsible for operationalizing safeguarding in the life of your organization. The most important thing is there must be somebody who is designated with that role and responsibility. In the absence of resources, since you're expressing the challenge that many founders have, which is constrained resources. In the absence of resources, a lot of us as founders double in many roles. We wear multiple hats. In fact, in the first 2 years of my organization, I became a website designer. I built my first website. I'm a very skilled graphics person. I design my reports. It's now that I have resources, I can now hire, 1 or 2 people or outsource it. I learned everything because I didn't have resources, but that role needed to be performed. So similarly in your case, where you don't have the resources to hire external people, you have to wear the hat. But most importantly, you must understand the safeguarding requirements. First and foremost, when you are going into a community, you have to be able to assure them that if there's any complaints regarding how my session is carried out, or any of my volunteers, interact with you in a way that you don't like, please, this is the number or this is the name of the person you are expected, you can channel your complaint to. That is a safeguarding measure. Some of you may have youth centers or centers that are put in different communities. You might put a complaint or a complaint box somewhere that allows people to submit anonymous complaints. And every week you go and take out the complaints and then you bring them to the knowledge of the organization and you begin to treat them. That is a safeguarding, measure. You have a logbook that if somebody complains, sometimes a young child may come to you and say, I don't want to go home. I don't want to go home. I'm afraid. You say, why? In that instance, it is a safeguarding incident. It is not caused by your program, but it has come to your attention that a beneficiary of your program is experiencing some form of trauma or, some condition at home that is a condition of either abuse or is a condition that, creates dysfunction or stress in their lives. And that thing needs to be treated. You might then, if it is brought to your attention, will you just let it go? You have a responsibility to either communicate with the guardians and parents that, it has been brought to our attention that a neighbor in your compound is harassing your daughter or harassing your son. your child was afraid to share it with us because they felt that, oh, there will be repercussions. But here's how we want to support you to deal with the issue. That is safeguarding. So there are very many ways you can put in place safeguarding measures. Again, before you take anybody's, like I said, you are doing a program, you want to be able to share it in your reports, to share it online. A safeguarding measure simply means that maybe you will print out a form, a consent form, and everybody who is a participant will first of all sign. If you will let them know, please, we intend to, take your images and take pictures, but these pictures will not be used for commercial purposes. We're not selling it to any magazine. We only want to use it to report to our stakeholders, our donors and our funders. That is stakeholding. Sorry, that is safeguarding. You communicate that to them and get their consent before you begin to take their images and post it on any site where they are not physically there. That is safeguarding. So there are many ways you can practice, and far more critical is for you to immediately adopt a safeguarding policy for your organization. Again, there are templates that you can download. There are resources that you can visit. Just go to Google and click, safeguarding training for development actors. You will see information that will come out. Safeguarding policy to be adapted for nonprofit organizations. You will see, a retinue of resources that will be generated, and you can begin to download and then adapt the ones that fit your organization. Thank you.
All right. The next question is, and also, what do you mean by board member as mentioned in the last class?
Board member, as mentioned in the last class, refers to the members of your board. Individuals that you invite to be members of your board, whether you call them trustees. In CAC, under CAC requirements, they are described as board trustees. So they are the individuals that serve as either your directors or trustees of your organization.
All right, thank you very much. I am having challenge of internet at this end as well. Samuel Ede is going to take over after this. So Adam, okay. Samuel Ede will take over. But meanwhile, we ask Port Harcourt to please go ahead with their question. After this, Samuel Ede will come up. And then go ahead. Please go ahead, Port Harcourt.
Unmute, Port Harcourt, unmute.
Unmute yourself, please. Great.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Please, can you just help us throw more light on the criteria for selecting board members? I think you said this at the last class, but what did you consider before selecting the class of board members you worked in setting up this organization? Thank you.
Thank you, Port Harcourt. Given the time that we spent on that session, if I begin to elaborate on the criteria for recruiting your board members, that's a whole session and it will eat into today's objectives. I'm wondering at the best way. The slides, I don't know whether the slides are available for participants so that they can, for some people who may not have attended last session and want to be able to catch up, that is my recommendation. If I were to just quickly do an overview.
The slides are available.
Good, the slides are available, Port Harcourt. So please, maybe the coordinators of the space in Port Harcourt, can we please ensure that all participants have the slides? I don't want us to lose out on today's objectives. And I also don't want to just gloss over those, criteria.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Adam, for the presentation. From Samira Galadima here, it says, well presented with lots of information, well done. Then Joyce Ekemi asks, he said, can we have the replay of this session. You definitely have it sent to you. I think there's a link where you can access that. So please visit there to get or to our Facebook page. You can always see that there. Then there's a question from Uyo Window. It said, good afternoon, Adam. From the last session, can a passion project remain that way without growing into an NGO? Does a passion project need CAC, Board of Trustees, Board of Directors? If people are suddenly interested in the passion project, but you feel it will be hijacked, how do you stand your grounds?
Thank you very much for that question from Uyo. Oh, absolutely. If I have a passion to, maybe train school girls on leadership, and I spend my retirement, or every time I'm on leave, I just go around schools teaching girls leadership, because I believe that the environment they come from, they're not exposed to leadership. And I can decide that that's just my passion project, is my contribution. I don't want to, the minute you are dealing with organization, you're creating structures for sustainability. For you, you are not thinking that, you're okay, when you are tired, you will stop your passion project. That's your discretion to exercise. It is completely fine. However, it has limitations in the sense that as a passion project, like I said, you can't put up formal structures. You are not registered. You can't have a bank account. So it's only your immediate friends and family that will ever be able to support you. You probably will not be able to raise money from the public. You can't raise money from donors, not probably, you won't be able to, So these are the limitations. Also, it will always be volunteer based. I mean, a passion project, are you going to start, if you hire somebody as a staff of what? So most likely you will just be keeping, getting people as maybe your own personal assistant. So you're never going to even be able to have formal contracts, because there's no vehicle, there's no formal vehicle or formal entity supporting that project. So once you are okay with the limitations, it's completely fine, because for you, it satisfies your own objectives and your own goals. And for you, you are not interested in elongating it or preserving it, or for the project to survive after you are long gone. You are just content with doing it at the scale at which you are doing it. Please go ahead. However, your second question asks that if people are suddenly interested in the passion project, but you feel it will be hijacked, how do you stand your ground? Well, I mean, it's reminding me of the basic contention with intellectual property. Intellectual property, when you don't want the risk of people stealing your property, that's why we have so many great ideas in Africa that never saw the light of day, because people refuse to share it, with the next person. If it is a formal project, for instance, and you are inviting people, you can have non-disclosure agreements. You can have, conflict of interest agreements that stipulate how people interact with your project. You can make it clear that, this project, you are not allowed to go and, replicate, or maybe in your case, maybe you create manuals, leadership manuals, or I don't know, sexual reproductive health training manuals for school youth, secondary school youth, to ensure, healthy sexual and reproductive health practices. And that manual, that is your passion project, but you don't want somebody to hijack it. Then you can enter in.
I guess our network is acting up.
What you're describing is just going to fall into the domain of maybe intellectual property. It is your idea, and you don't want your idea to be, hijacked or stolen without or to be utilized for any other purpose without benefits coming to you, things like that. So I hope that addresses your question. It's basically a legal question. How do you protect your intellectual ideas or your, project from being used without your permission? There are many ways to safeguard your idea, but at that level, most likely you're going to have to be dealing with the public as a formal entity. Either you register your idea as a trademark or as a patent, or whatever the case may be. It stands better grounds of being protected in that scenario.
All right, thank you so much once again, Adam. Yeah, someone is asking, he said, kindly highlight the other foundational document like project charter that's, I think, needed for starting up an NGO.
So I think what the person meant to say was board charter, because the word I used was board charter, not project charter. And again, all those things are contained in the slides. So please just request for access to the slides from wherever you are joining from. And if you are joining not through a space, but online through the link, I think you can send an email or drop your email in the chat box. And I suspect that the organizers will be able to, with what your interest is, and then they will get the slides across to you.
All right,
But
thank you so much.
those things are covered in last week's discussion.
Yeah,
Is it okay? It's 12:30 now. Is it okay if we suspend the Q&A so I can dive into the final component of sustainability, which is resources? It's a bit vast. I don't want to rush it.
okay, I think we can go ahead with that.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you everyone for your questions and evidence that you are participating and that this is useful for you. I'm so happy that, you know, the information we're sharing is able to assist you. And I encourage you to please, if you have further questions, just reach out, send them to the organizers. They can always, you know, send them to me. I can also drop my email address, so that will allow you to, you know, ask further questions via email. Now, the final fourth component that I've divided sustainability pillars into is what I call resources. And in this case, let me be very specific. I'm talking about funding, because people are resources and we've already covered people under structure. So I'm not talking about people as a resource now. I'm not talking about, you know, internal people, external people, partners. And I'm talking about funding. Funding as a way to ensure the continuity of your organization. You have to have your head focused on this question when you are starting out. It's a mistake many of us make. I made it. When I started, I was only focused, like I said, on that immediate project. So I was only raising money for that immediate. You know, I wasn't focused on the question of how am I going to create a structure with people? How will I pay salaries? How will I, you know, have an office space that can accommodate meetings, invite external stakeholders for strategy planning? How will I be able to pay for utilities? How will I be able to acquire assets that can allow us to go on the field, computer assets, office equipment? How will I be able to, you know, operate, to buy fuel, to go in and out, transport ourselves, to buy stationery routinely, to stock up our inventory? How will I be able to? I didn't think of these things, but they're important because they are the difference between, like that our friend from Uyo asked, your pet project and your sustainable organization. So please, the question of funding must be with you from the beginning. It means that if you do your homework well, and next session, we're going to go into strategy planning. This week, we're focused on sustainability planning. And I've tried to help you identify the elements that you must cover in your sustainability plan. When you are thinking of sustainability, you must think of people, you must think of structure, you must think of systems. Now, you must think of funding. That means that if you've developed an effective strategic plan that covers maybe your organization for the next 2 years, it must come with a budget. You must be able to evaluate or measure or estimate the cost of achieving those goals you've set out to achieve over the next 2 years. What do they mean or imply in terms of cost? And everything must be costed. Everything must be costed. You see, the problem we encounter is because when we started out, we were bringing money from our pockets. Most times, we didn't separate ourselves from the organization. Oh, the organization needs to go to this community, fuel. You just immediately, you know, enter your ATM card. You go to the petrol station. You are going to the community for the organization's work. You just take your personal ATM card. You quickly, you know, remove the money, buy the fuel, you move. because of that, you forget that there was an element of fuel that went into the execution of that project. Please don't do that. That's why I always tell people, when you develop your concept document, that concept document says, oh, I'm going to organize an information and awareness session for teenagers on how to avoid peer pressure or drug abuse, to reduce the incidence of illicit drug use in my community. I'm going to visit 5 schools in so community or local government area where there's a high prevalence of codeine abuse. There's a recorded high prevalence of codeine abuse in that local government. I will go to those 5 schools and hold sessions with students from SS1 to SS3, right? You're developing your concept document. That concept now, you must break it into what we call a work plan. That work plan is now going to itemize activities. So for this concept to materialize, there is what we call pre-live phase or pre-project. There is live project, there's post-project, right? In the pre-live phase, okay, I'm going to reach out to facilitators, people who can come and talk, maybe mental health experts. I'm going to reach out to anti-drug abuse advocates. I'm also going to reach out to, what are the other people? Maybe I will invite one charismatic local musician who can come and, also be an ambassador on all these during our session. So these 3 experts, okay? So I'll send emails. You are breaking down all the activities. I will do emails. I will use phone calls to do follow-up. I will do visits to the agency against National Orientation Agency in local government in my state to also, invite them. I will go to the ministry for approvals to go to the schools. All of this is itemizing all the activities. For all those activities, there's a budget. You must say, okay, so if I'm going to this, I'm taking letters to Ministry of Education to gain approvals to go to schools. What does that mean? I'm printing. Either I'm printing in my office and I'm using stationery, you cost it, or I'm printing externally and therefore paying, business centers, you cost it. I will use transportation to go to those places. I will make phone calls, so there will be communication costs, there will be transportation costs, there will be printing and administrative costs. All those things just under activity 1 alone. By the time you finish and you've gone to the live phase, under live phase, which is project implementation phase, okay, schools visitation, live activities in schools, 5 schools, 3 individual project officers or 3 external facilitators, 1 project officer being myself. So I will give honorarium to the external people who are coming, or at least transport stipend. I will transport myself to the schools, you will budget. So for visitation to school 1, this is the cost. Visitation to school 2, this is the cost. By the time you finish that work plan, there's a full budget. Mind you, that project budget is not the only budget activity for your organization. There is a back-end administrative budget. If you have an office, there's an admin officer who is sitting down, meeting people at the reception every day, who gains a salary. There is generator cost that you put on the generator so that, you will blow fan on your staff, or you will be able to use your printer in the office to work. You are costing what we call overheads. By the time you add all if you have 3 different interventions, maybe 3 separate projects, apart from this, anti-drug advocacy project in 5 schools, maybe you have another activity or project you are running. You've done the work plan and therefore the budget for that project is created. You then have your overheads. That gives you your organizational budget for the year. In year 2, you will say, apart from the goal of implementation of programs, organizational system strengthening or hiring of staff, I have another goal, which is increasing fundraising. We want to hit a target we want to grow from 5 million to 15 million. So we are going to host fundraising events. that event, those events that you are hosting to make money, you will cost it too. We're going to hold a cocktail. We're going to hold a lunch. We're going to do storytelling. We're going to launch Facebook adverts for the next 12 months consistently. All those things you will cost. So year 2 budget, you will now also cost it. By the time you have year 1 and year 2 budget, and you now know that for me to run this organization effectively in 2 years, I need the sum of 17 million naira, or I need the sum of 7 million naira, or I need a small sum of 3 million naira. Then that is your working tool. You can't raise funds without a benchmark. Your budget is your benchmark. So many times I encounter founders that say, can I see your organizational budget for the year? They don't have it. You're just going by this, you're just going by whims and caprice. You're just going by whatever the market tells you. After you've budgeted accurately, you also put miscellaneous, or, if you do your effective risk management, then you will know that there's a potential risk that, fuel costs might be, increased. Inflation rise. For the last 4 years, Nigeria has experienced an inflation rate of so and so percentage annually. Therefore, it is likely that in this next 2 years, this rate will continue, or it might even grow. Therefore, my miscellaneous, you'll be able to accommodate those potential rates of inflation within your miscellaneous. This is how you are planning. You have a budget. So one of the first elements of revenue or fundraising is to first of all have a budget, a plan, the financial plan that backs every other plan. You can have a sustainability plan. It is nothing if there is no financial plan supporting it. Your financial plan is a budget. It is a statement of your projected income and your projected expenditure. I expect to spend this, the amount of money I'm going to spend. Therefore, this is the amount of money I must bring in. I am projecting that I will be able to raise this income through the following activities. I will apply for this so and so grant, or I have 50 key stakeholders that I have mapped, which leads me to one of the aspects of how you do fundraising, your stakeholder mapping. Your stakeholder mapping. Some of you are in different fields. All of us are in different fields of impact. We are addressing different challenges. We must be able to identify critical stakeholders that are connected to our work, that have vested interest in our work. These stakeholders may not only be your stakeholders are not necessarily just the beneficiaries of your interventions or their guardians and their parents. Like I said, I gave an illustration last week. If I'm in an environment where there is a lack of skills amongst the youth labor force, especially in the area of green sector jobs. And over the last 2 years, we've noticed that green sector companies have started coming into that local government. By green sector jobs, we're talking about, all these renewable energy jobs, solar energy companies, and they are looking for young people in that community that can install solar panels in households, in businesses, in public places. And young people don't have the skill sets. My NGO can decide, I'm going to tackle unemployment in my community by providing skills for youth in that community in the area of in the area of jobs within the green sector. Skills acquisition programs strictly within the green sector. So I will be teaching skills in soilless farming, hydroponics, solar panel installations, horticulture, all the different recycling to young people in the community so that they can then go into jobs that are available in companies or even create new jobs for themselves by starting their entrepreneurial journeys. The companies that are trying to look for talent, that are looking for people to employ for those their solar panel installations, they are your stakeholders, because they too, it is a headache that they are facing, that there's nobody to employ in that local government. Meanwhile, there's a huge demand for solar panels in maybe businesses and households, but they always have to bring in people from Lagos or people from Abeokuta or people from, think of your community and the maybe neighboring states. Those are the people they have to hire to come and do solar panel installations. And it is costly. It is increasing their cost of operation. So that company will rather support your NGO to train 500 youth over the next 1 year so that they can then begin to hire from the pool of talent that you have trained. That is your stakeholder. So when you are mapping your stakeholders, you have to begin to think, who will benefit from this intervention? from a market, from a rational economic perspective now, who will benefit? It is in whose interest? The government agency. Maybe the government, there's a mandate that a new agency was set up. Maybe NAPTIP has been set up to train or to stop. Maybe new funds have been deployed for anti-human trafficking activities, and NAPTIP is looking. Or remember when Anti-Corruption Commission, not EFCC, was that the other ICPC? When ICPC was set up, ICPC had a mandate to educate the public, to sensitize the public on anti-corruption measures or on anti-corruption. So ICPC was partnering with schools, was partnering with NGOs and community-based organizations to train and sensitize the public on corruption issues and anti-corruption mitigation strategies. So because of that, ICPC had a fund. Therefore, ICPC, in the case of an NGO who is established to tackle corruption through anti-corruption strategies, ICPC becomes your stakeholder. These are examples of how you do your stakeholder mapping. A serious organization that wants to realize its budget, that wants to be able to, you've already mapped out the cost, what it will cost you to do your activities that you've said are necessary for you to realize your mission statement. There is a budget that itemizes the cost of realizing those activities. The onus is on you as the founder to raise the money. It will not fall on your head. You must raise it. You have to introduce innovative and creative approaches to fundraising. Key amongst them being your stakeholder mapping. You have to look around you. Who are the companies that are likely to support me? And you must pursue them aggressively. Who are the local philanthropists? People that, they've built a career, they are accomplished in their lives, and they are given to philanthropy. You want them to be able to focus their resources or their giving, their donations on your own objective. Some of you may be working in the area of disability rights. You need to be able to find those individuals in our society who are passionate about disability rights and inclusion. Maybe they have a child who struggled in school because they were hearing impaired or visually impaired and they had to send the person abroad. And therefore, they've devoted their life to supporting NGOs that are working in this local environment to increase opportunities for children living with similar disabilities. You must find them. If you find such a family, for instance, and they commit that every year, I will support this NGO with a sum of 5 million, that's their own contribution. It goes a long way into your work. This is why you must do what we call strategic stakeholder mapping. It is detailed. Some people spend 2 weeks in a room closeted with their team members, just doing stakeholder mapping. They're identifying the different groups. Sometimes it's even foreign-based. Okay, what UN institution or agency or what multilateral system has declared this, area of development as their own mandate? They want to wipe out food insecurity. So they want to support local farmers, especially women farmers, to improve farming practices and methods so that, there can be higher, smallholder farmers can increase their yield. These are just examples. You have to find those organizations whose objective it is similar to yours, or who have CSR departments, and those CSR departments have, so you must even be reading organizational reports. I do that a lot. At the end of the year, I read many organizations' reports because most times they will tell you their next year strategy. Oh, my focus is to support visual, the focus of our CSR is to support the visually impaired. We are going to be hosting a marathon race or an Olympics in Lagos, a Paralympics in Lagos for people who are visually impaired. And you know that your organization is, supporting children who are living with visual impairment. You immediately begin to send messages, send letters, send emails, request for meetings and appointments with the CSR director in that kind of organization, saying, this is the work that I do. If you partner with us, you will realize your mission or your goal or your CSR strategy for the year. So that is what we call one of the first activities you have to do, stakeholder mapping. Stakeholder mapping exercise is a separate session on its own. I can spend 2 hours training on stakeholder mapping and stakeholder, strategizing, because it involves segmenting, your society, putting people in segments, profiling. Am I dealing with, people on the basis of thematic areas of interest? Am I dealing with people on the basis of, geographic proximity? Maybe all the corporate entities that are within my state or within my local government. So you will segment. Am I dealing with government agencies, that is regulatory bodies whose mandate it is to, advance development in this area? You have to, so stakeholder, I'm just giving you one step, but what I'm stressing is you need to go and further educate yourself on how to do an effective stakeholder mapping exercise. And bear in mind that if you do a stakeholder mapping exercise at the beginning of the year, that's not the same map that you'll be using for the next 2-3 years. No, your stakeholder mapping exercise has to be routine and frequent. You have to keep updating it because new actors are coming into the space. New companies are being formed. New regulatory bodies are being established. Some regulatory bodies are being, repurposed. Sometimes their mandate ends, they're collapsed. Sometimes they're harmonized into another group. Different actors and stakeholders are coming into the space. You have to be able to recognize who are the new stakeholders in the space, what is their own stated, strategic focus, focal objective, how does it align with mine, what is the best approach? There are different approaches for different stakeholders. Some stakeholders, all they need to see from you every year is your reports. Some other stakeholders, you need to use social media to reach them. You need to use social media branding, effective social media communication, branding. Some other stakeholders, you must use meetings, you must set up meetings. Maybe all these local philanthropists, all these babas that have, amassed wealth, they're elderly. It's not your social media post that they will use to see you. You must set up a meeting. You must get their PA to allow you audience where you will now share the goals and mission and ask for, how you can set up a legacy fund so that the name of this person will never die. You will set up a legacy fund that will always, basically promote the name of this donor in the public domain because of their contributions to your objectives, things like that. So different approaches when you talk about stakeholder engagement. Another thing you need to do is improve your storytelling. By storytelling, I'm not saying that the tales by moonlight that we used to tell. I'm sure many of you now understand that storytelling is now a very recognized genre in development space, in development work. Storytelling represents how you communicate the impact of your work, how you communicate the activity, is your story of impact, how you are sharing it with the public, how you are sharing it with the, with the wider society every day through available channels. The very effective storytelling channels these days are new media channels, social media channels. How do you use your Instagram? Does your organization have a website where it puts out images and its reports, graphic reports of its latest projects? It's very important. Are you updating your website? If I check your website, is it this information that you had since 2019 that is still there? Are you using social media channels like your Instagram page that involve use of graphics? Because images are very compelling. How well are you even communicating through those channels? Do you have an experienced storyteller? What kind of content? How do you share your stories of impact? Do you just use infographics that just tell us numbers? Oh, yesterday we went to 10 schools. We reached 500 students. We were able to train them in digital literacy. Or we tell the story of young Aminat, who basically, when she first encountered a computer, did not even know where to put on the switch on button. However, all her life, she has desired to learn how to use the computer because she understands that, the computer is the tool for the 21st century. Her family does not have the money to, pay for a computer in the house. and in her school, there's no computer lab. So Aminat desperately desires digital literacy or computer skills, but has always despaired of ever accessing the opportunity to learn it. Her eyes lit up with glee when she first touched the switch on button and saw the computer boot to life. Imagine if you tell a story of that young girl and then use her as a symbol of all the other students you are encountering, with this skill. Or you talk about that, that young man who had been looking for a job for 4 years without ever getting one. But after participating in our skills acquisition program, now is the proud owner or founder of a small barber shop or entrepreneur who set up a barber shop. And in the last 6 months has been able to record a revenue of 1.5, it says, or 700,000 naira. With this barber shop now, Basi is able to support his 3 children and his wife. He is now proud to lift up his head in his community. That's the power of storytelling. And then you put a powerful image of Basi standing in front of his new barber shop after you people trained him in, hairdressing, whatever, and with his clippers. And Basi has a wide smile on his face. These are examples of how storytelling can immediately attract people to the work that you are doing. By the time they see that, and you now say, our organization is committed to training 400 other Basis. Or at the end of 2022, the goal of our organization is to reach 50 additional communities to train 500 more young Nigerians so that they can also lift up their heads in pride in their community and avoid lives of crime. You will find, people aroused, their attention has been grabbed. You say, to train one participant, it will cost a sum of 15,000 naira per head to train one participant in this skill. Support the work of So Human Empowerment Initiative by contributing today. Next thing, you're using your social media storytelling channels to generate funds, and you're able to track. And remember, from your stakeholder engagement, it's not enough to get donations. You have to have a way of relating with your stakeholders. Promoting your stakeholders. From time to time, you can do donor spotlights. Today, we are putting the spotlight on our consistent donor all the way from Yenagua, who is very passionate about, supporting the cause of single mothers and ensuring that single mothers are able to financially take care of or supporting the cause of widows, or supporting the cause of them. We thank you for your support to our organization over the last 2 years. To also, this donor's philosophy is that one for all for one. Somebody somewhere too might decide, let me give to these people, this is a good cause, this is a good cause. These are just examples. Another thing you need to focus on is grants and proposal development. Grants and proposal development. The SDGs, the 17 SDGs represent the world's current developmental priorities. What that means is that funds are being channeled globally to achieve or to attain the sustainable development goals in these 17 areas. If you are able to write compelling grant applications or develop sound proposals that communicate to donor bodies and donor organizations and donor individuals that you are equipped to carry out interventions that will bring about results in development, then you stand a chance to also win those grants. So this is why it is an untapped area for many founders. Many founders are unable to write grant applications. Many founders don't have the eligibility, they don't satisfy the eligibility criteria. When they've written their grant proposal, by the time the donors ask them for supporting documents, they are lacking. They say, can I see your audited financial statements for the last 2 years? They don't have it. Can I see your policy, your financial procedures and practices manual? They don't have it. Can I see your safeguarding policy? They don't have it. Can I see your proof of filing your annual returns or compliance, legal compliance with regulatory bodies and institutions in your country? They don't have it. Can I see your good thing? Many of us here will have our certificates of incorporation, your CSC certificate of incorporation. But these are basically things that donors will ask for. Apart from your proposal document, your wonderful, laudable, lofty proposal, they will ask you for supporting documents. They will ask for those supporting documents because that is proof of your sustainability. That is proof of your credibility, that the pillars that ensure, effective structuring and standard procedures of your organization are in place. Please, it is important to let us get our house in order. So if you don't have the money to hire a grant writer in-house, that is to hire a proposal writer, to hire somebody who, a business development officer or a fundraising officer, whose role it is to source for grants. You, the founder, you have to learn, you have to learn how to improve your writing, you have to go for trainings, you have to learn how to put out sound, compelling grant applications. Then begin to train one of the members of staff, especially those who are working in programs, because they understand the language of programs. They understand the language, the terminologies of development. Train them to also begin to write grant applications. Attend webinars. When these donors put out requests for grant proposals, oftentimes they accompany it with webinars where they will tell you, these are our requirements. Oh, these are the 5 critical thematic areas we are focused on, and we're looking for grant applications that fit these areas or align with these areas. Attend those kinds of things. In the next session, I will also touch on, community engagement. So some of those things will cover all the other elements of, even it's part of fundraising. Attend NGO events, attend development functions, attend conferences, attend summits, build relationships. I tell people a lot of grant writing has to do with relationships, because if a donor already knows you ahead of time and knows the impact of your work, when they see your application before them, they'll be like, because of the reputation you've already earned through the relationship you've fostered, you're not going to be considered in the same way that all the other pool of applicants are considered. So go for these functions, network effectively. Networking is very critical. Network at these functions. And finally, try to also internally generate revenues to have your program sustainable. When you are doing trainings, maybe you ask the participants to pay for their certificates. When you're doing trainings, subsidized, it might not always be free. You can do subsidized trainings, because sometimes the beneficiaries of these programs, they don't have the resources. They can't afford these trainings. But for you to be sustainable, you might not be able to give everything for free. So have a system in place where you can also, or maybe you have products, like I know some people who are in the economic empowerment space, they make soaps, they make beads, they make different things that the organization sells so that it is able to generate revenue to support some of its basic costs. These are things that I encourage, they are good practices that you should do well to continue as part of your fundraising strategy towards sustainability. It is 2 minutes past 1. On that note, I rest my case for today. Thank you for your attention.
So please, can we all put our hands together once again for our speaker? Adam, thank you so much for this inspiring. We are so grateful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Our time is fast spent. We'll not be able to take further questions because it's already past 1. We just want to appreciate everyone for being part of today's workshop. Thursday, the class still continues. So for those of us who are interested in a MOOC camp, please, you can join us in any of American spaces as well as online for the MOOC camp. So you can join us to learn. I think we are learning publishing through the Kindle application. So be part of it and get the requisite skills and knowledge you need to succeed in life. So once again, we want to appreciate you, Adam, for this wonderful session. And we are looking up to Thursday for another wonderful session. So thank you, everyone. And from American Center, Lagos, we say thank you, enjoy the rest of the day, and bye-bye to everyone.